Good morning, Commissioners. This is Troy, your host. We are live and recording.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our continuance of Pine Canyon Plan Development, Rezoning, and Water Appeal Project Files ZR 2020-010 and MI 2020-009. I'm going to call this meeting to order and ask that you all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and I'll ask the attorney again if we have certification of the agenda.
You do. The County Attorney's Office has previously certified the item on the agenda, and this matter is properly continued from September 10th.
Okay, great. And do any commissioners have disclosures for items on this agenda?
I have none, thank you.
Okay, and I have none either. I'll remind the public that Commissioner Teal is excused or recused from this item today. So we will recall that public comment has closed. We did have an opportunity to hear from many, and again, I appreciate everyone for spending their time with us last week. We did continue today to resume our discussion of this agenda item, and we'll begin with the applicant's response. Mr. Pochner.
Good morning, Chair Layden, Commissioner Thomas. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Again, my name is Marcus Pochner. I'm a land use and community outreach consultant on behalf of Pine Canyon. As the Chair just noted, we have reflected on the public testimony. We have looked and reviewed our notes and all the comments that were made. We are here today to offer our rebuttal and further assert our compliance with the approval criteria for both the PD and the water appeal. Our full team is here and assembled to answer any detailed questions. I will note that there are three primary topics that we hope to address in our rebuttal. These are more generalized topics, but again, we will be here to answer any more specific questions or comments that you do have. I will help facilitate the discussion for our team. We'll have 3 or 4 different speakers through these 3 topics. The primary rebuttal topics that we will address are community outreach and the PD, the land plan, the planning document that is before you. Second, we will turn to the water appeal and our conformance with Section 18A, and we will also assert, based on the testimony we heard, 2 conditions of approval that we'd like to offer based on the testimony and feedback that we received. Thirdly, third topic, we will address annexation to Castle Rock, and this 20-year pursuit to balance property rights, to find the balance between property rights and process. In closing, we will offer 2 additional conditions of approval that we would like to recommend on the PD document itself. So 2 conditions of approval on the water appeal and 2 on the PD. Next slide, please. First, I will address the community engagement and the PD commitments and process. This is a summary, as there were many comments that some of the people did not know or hear about community meetings. This is just the 2024 community engagement, the list of meetings that were held and the attendance and notice. I will point out the first 2 were a couple of luncheons, open house format. Then specifically, we started the reflective planning of meeting with all adjoining neighborhoods. Escavera, 120 people attended from Escavera and Woodlands. Many of the people that were in the room and testified were in that meeting. That meeting was attended by the town of Castle Rock. We provided 259 notices, 120 attended that. We focused only on 3, 4, and 5. Then the parcels immediately adjacent to Escavera. We then did the same thing for Woodlands, again, focusing on their parcels. We then did it for the road for the west side of I-25, Liggett Road, the multi-use, the mixed use, and the light industrial around there, and then finished with terrain. We also worked with each respective HOA, and they provided their own notice, the HOA management companies, to their members. We did a very complete and holistic approach to community outreach. These were lightly attended. except for the first meeting with 120. I do want to show how important this was, though, because this is where we really started to hear the values people wanted to see, to reflect their land plan, to be mirror images of their existing neighborhoods. Next slide. This is actually a copy of the invitation. We use a mail service, so it is a certified that goes out, people receive it, and they receive this exactly. It actually shows the area of notice. This is an example of the terrain notice. It shows the area that we covered, again, notifying over 80 residents and going through that specifically on parcels 1, 2, and 3. We practice what we preach. We believe in community outreach, and we believe in the feedback. So a completely fair process as we go to the next slide. Why were there so many people here to speak against the project? Why were there people that said, we don't know anything about this and we haven't heard? Ladies and gentlemen, it is my part of my job to really go through the process. There has been a very coordinated opposition campaign against this proposal. The town of Castle Rock, this is an actual screenshot of one of the 8 different social media posts they made about the project. They encouraged people with rhetoric and language to lean in and oppose Pine Canyon. This started before the Planning Commission. This was about 2 weeks before the Planning Commission and has escalated eight different times. It had a link to the town webpage, town of government. It had draft letters of opposition. It had talking points, and it had things such as you are going to have a sewer right next to your house, which is not correct information. This is what has led to this remarkable opposition campaign that you saw. I fully respect it. It's within the law, but this is what has led to that. I want to share something with you, the most remarkable number you are going to hear. And yes, we did the research. 93.5% of the correspondence you received either copied town council or town staff or was generated from the platform that you link on this webpage. 93.5% of all the correspondence you received was based on this coordinated campaign. Now, the great thing about that is, and that is all part of the process, is it leads to messaging that we're able to hear, that we all heard that day. So now I want to address the messaging and some of the things that we heard. The most important thing, it was almost completely silent on the PD. There was almost complete acquiescence that the land plan was acceptable, that the land plan reflected the images, reflected the adjoining neighborhoods, that had appropriate densities. The PD is what is before you. It was almost taken for granted that the PD is in compliance, that it meets your approval criteria, that we are able to mitigate any impact. So the first thing I want to notice is the absolute lack of response about the PD, because it's compliant. We are meeting your approval criteria. There were a couple of things about urban density. I just want to focus again on reflective planning. Most of our sites are less than 3.5 dwelling units per acre. Parcel 4, which abuts both Escavera and Woodlands, is 1.7 dwelling units per acre. Very low density. Only when we have multifamily is it immediately adjacent to the bluffs, a multifamily development. On the west side of I-25, in a mixed-use community, we propose a mixed-use use. Again, completely reflective, completely honoring the built environment that exists today. But we went further. We said every 300 feet within our single-family boundary, we will match or exceed your lot size. That's why it's working, because we have taken 20 years to figure out a land plan that honors the existing context. There were comments as well about park and rec impacts. We are proposing 8.5 miles of trails, 8.5 miles of trails. We showed our site as a wheel, as a hub. It is the east-west connection for vehicular and recreational. It is the only way to connect from Founders to the Plum Creek Water Valley. It connects that. It provides that trail. We also have to go through creating amenities, open space, parks, 175 acres of open space we are providing on this site. I fully respect the multiple comments we heard about wildlife. I just want to note in your staff report and in the agency referral comments, both Douglas County Open Space and the Colorado Department of Public Parks and Wildlife complemented that the 72-acre, the homestead, the ranch, the educational, that riparian reserve is for wildlife passage, to have safe corridors, to allow that to happen in the basin. It's specifically to honor the existing wildlife, that we have the buffers, that we have created wildlife friendly fencing, That is the basis. We share that same value. It is part of our plan. There were questions about the mobility hub. As you know, west of I-25, I just want to stress something that was said. Castle Rock is looking at 2 other sites as part of the CDOT analysis for a mobility hub. We are a 3rd site. We are all following a CDOT process for a mobility hub. A mobility hub is a mixed-use development that has diversity of housing products that relies on multiple modes of transportation. Think of the west side. We have 2 railroad lines. Transportation, we have roadways, we have bicycles, we want ball fields, we want multiple modes. It is the most inherent multimodality site in Castle Rock. And secondly, it is the most logical site for a future Front Range passenger rail site to come and rest on that site. We are leaning in. We think it is a terrific use. And again, it really reflects those values of diversity of product and a prudent planning process. The schools were brought up. There was a comment that the schools don't support because of my comment that it would be many years before a school was built on this site. We all know the process. You dedicate land to Douglas County Schools. They then determine and build that school. I know there's a bond initiative that's on the ballot this November. There's many other things going on. Our commitment is being met. We want to build that school. We use that as an example of how we can bring forward that public-partner-private partnership to build the ball fields. Not one person mentioned the ball fields because it is way too logical. It is the perfect opportunity to bring ball fields here, to share with County School District, and to bring those forward now in a Castle Rock adjacent or central Castle Rock location. I'll address the petition. There was a petition that was cited that has been formed in the last week with 500 signatures to require annexation. We will specifically address that topic of required annexation. But the general theory was there are impacts to Castle Rock. There's impacts to Castle Rock. So we have addressed density. We have addressed amenities. Now let's talk about the roadways, that other impact that was often brought up. First of all of the roadways within Pine Canyon will be dedicated public roadways, open and accessible to all. We are the hub. We are the central spine. We actually believe this site will be more burdened by traffic coming through the site than comes out from this site. We think it is so integral to the transportation systems and pedestrian systems for Castle Rock. This is a tremendous benefit. Additionally, and I will point out, there was a comment made about our process for a traffic study. This traffic study follows the exact same national and local standards for Douglas County and CDOT as it would for the town and CDOT. It meets all of those. It was incredibly comprehensive. It led to improvements in 12 intersections, $80 million plus of roadway infrastructure to the benefit of all community members that travel on these roadways. I will end with this point on the roadways. In your staff report, it actually was so clear. It says, engineering services concurs with the conclusion of the traffic analysis. Sufficient roadway capacity is expected to be available for the roadways within the scope of the traffic impact study to maintain adequate levels of service. It meets the requirements. The comment on sewer and smell from our facility, our reuse facility, that's actually what highlighted in all of the Castle Rock. It said these are too close to facilities. The existing Plum Creek Castle Rock facility is 606 feet away from the nearest resident. We are proposing 1,600 feet. It also said we would be too close to the Plum Creek Trail. We are 3 times further away than the existing Castle Rock facility is from that same trail. We are living the values to give benefit to the community. Lastly, I will close on this thought on the PD. We again believe there was great acquiescence. There was great growing support for the land plan. We understand that most of the commentary was focused on the water appeal. But I just want to point out that we agree with the Planning Commission. We agree with Douglas County staff. We believe we meet all approval criteria for the PD application that is before you today. We'll now transition to the second primary topic. We will address the water appeal and conformance with Section 18A If we can go to the next slide, and Kurt Walker will address this topic.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, commissioners. So, talking about the topic that was discussed most in what we heard from the public and from the other entities who came up to testify on Tuesday is the issue of water. And commissioners, I think you both cut to the core when you asked your questions regarding what we explained to the Planning Commission about the approval criteria and what it requires us to do in terms of gathering data around quantity, quality, and dependability of our water supply to ensure the sustainability of our water supply. So I'm going to address those three topics. I'm going to start first with quantity. And there are three aspects of our water plan that are specifically designed to talk about and to speak to the sustainability of our quantity. First, it's worth noting that this water appeal is not about supply. It is only about demand. We're seeking board approval to use less water than we have in our supply. Our plan preserves at least 35% of our owned water rights portfolio in the aquifer, which makes the aquifer itself more sustainable in the long term for all users. Secondly, conservation is a core principle by which we will be allowed to lengthen our supply. We have an in-depth water efficiency plan, which details effective design, building, monitoring, and enforcement codes that all builders, residences, businesses, and the district itself will be bound by. All outdoor irrigation water usage at Pine Canyon will be managed by the district itself instead of by residences or businesses, which means that it will be run by a highly respected leading irrigation management firm, Brightview Landscaping. And that firm actually operates multiple recycled watering systems inside and outside Douglas County today. They do so at Meridian, they do so at Independence, a master plan community doing the same type of water plan we're proposing very effectively, very successfully, 10 miles away from Pine Canyon. In addition, all residences will incorporate a smart water meter via a partnership with Flume Inc. These meters report real-time water data and usage for both indoor and outdoor demands, even down to the individual fixture level. Many districts throughout the U.S. use Flume smart metering monitors, and they gather that real-time data, and they show how that water is being used, they show where inefficiencies lie, and they show how to address problems when they arise. I use one of these meters in my home, which was built in 1998, and even without all of the codes and enforcement in the Pine Canyon Water Plan, I can meet our restrictions in my home today. Thirdly, and most powerfully, reuse is the best way to strengthen and lengthen a water supply. Reuse is the gold standard as enumerated by every water expert. In our September 2023 referral response memo, which is in the packet in attachment I, we quoted 3 regional water entities and their thoughts on water reuse. Unfortunately, these entities didn't bring up these thoughts when they spoke on Tuesday, but their thoughts nonetheless were in this packet, and we quoted them a year ago. The South Metro Water Supply Authority declares on their website that reuse is, quote, a priority because it offers an opportunity to significantly increase supplies and make them more reliable. Dominion Water and Sanitation describes reuse as an effective way that a district can, quote, stretch its water supply portfolio. And Castle Rock Water describes reuse as one of the, quote, most cost-effective, environmentally sound, and safe water supplies. Reuse water is economical because we do not have to purchase new water nor pump it from great distances. Since we are using the water that is already available, reuse water is also a sustainable supply regardless of growth or drought. Castle Rock Water goes farther, categorizing reuse as a type of renewable water on its long-term water website, where it shows that Castle Rock Water plans to meet its renewable water goals mostly with reuse water. Moving on to quality, it's worth very careful notation that the water produced at our water reclamation facility, not only will it be kept on site and not discharged to the watershed, meaning that there will not be pollutants and nutrients discharged, but that the water created and produced will meet the highest quality of water standards in the state. In fact, the recycled water it produces will be 2 categories higher than the water that is currently produced and discharged by the Plum Creek Water Reclamation Authority into East Plum Creek. The water we're talking about being produced at Pine Canyon is category 3+ water. It's so safe and so clean that it's allowed by the state to be used to water vegetable gardens. You could use it to water your tomato and then pick that tomato and eat that tomato. This water that comes out of the facility, that's the water that's going to be in our storage ponds. That's the water that's not going to be problematic or odorous. Moving on to dependability. Our plan meets the dependability criteria, as use of the Denver Basin Aquifer is very dependable, especially in the Central Basin. Next slide, please. This is because of the nature of the water supply itself. Mr. Eklund explained on Tuesday, the groundwater under Pine Canyon exists in the best part of what he described as one of the American West's greatest pieces of natural infrastructure. You can see on the map above, we lie within the Central Basin. The other entities who were described in public testimony as needing to be helped or bailed out because of problems they faced all exist within margins or within the fractured granite areas within the county where they're existing on the, as Mr. Eklund described it, edges of the cereal bowl. The Central Basin is the most dependable area of the aquifer, while renewable water resources all face dependability issues. They're all interruptible. They're subject to the dates of their seniority, they're subject to drought, and they're subject to infrastructure challenges. This was quoted by Castle Rock Water, and when they stated as much in an April 2023 letter to the county. Quote, many of the currently available renewable water supplies are interruptible, if not by contract, then by drought or nature. And the county's own water consultant, Bruce Lytle, stated in his response to one of our water appeal documentation letters that, quote, since we are not aware of any means to firm a wise supply at this time, this water supply is not a viable source of water for Pine Canyon. In closing, we believe we have absolutely gathered a sufficient amount of data around quantity, quality, and dependability to show that our water supply is sustainable. That said, we're more than willing to understand, listen to, and hear when public comment talks about what we are proposing. And as a result, as Marcus said, we do have 2 proposed conditions of approval, if it so pleases you. The first of which is something we heard regarding folks not willing to just accept a promise. They want reliability, verifiability. So we have a condition of approval here based on the idea of providing auditable reports, similar to what we see at Dominion, whereby we would be more than willing to provide auditable reports to the board or whatever authority necessary, showing that we're meeting the demand standards we're proposing here, showing that they are achievable and reasonable. Secondarily, as we've said many times, part of our water plan in the long term is the acquisition and integration of a renewable water resource as part of our overall water supply. We have said that it is integrated into our CDPHE approvals, which we gained in November 2022. And it's also in our Metro District supply service plans, which are currently on file with the county. But we would like to codify those. And that is a second condition of approval we're willing to offer if it pleases the board, that we will commit to that, making sure that it is something that we do as a condition of approval before you today. With that, I'll turn it back over to Marcus to move forward.
Terrific. We'll transition then to our third and final topic, the discussion of annexation to Castle Rock and that 20-year pursuit. Both the chair and Commissioner Thomas mentioned finding the balance, and you gave different examples of finding the balance in this discussion. We are trying to find that balance between property rights and the planning process. So first, Bill will address the annexation or required annexation, and then I'll come back and close out.
Thank you, Marcus.
Bottom, pull towards you. There you go.
Great. That's working. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, commissioners. My name is Bill Kyriagis, Kyriagis. I'm an attorney with Ott & Johnson. So the issue I am addressing really goes beyond the specific approval criteria. It's more of an overarching legal issue that really, I think, puts this matter in context in light of really what the town's objective has been here. We've heard some comments from you addressing that there is property rights aspect to this, and I want to address a specific legal element that ties into the property rights issue. And that is specifically the notion of whether the Walker family should be required to annex to the town of Castle Rock in order to develop their property. You heard Kurt Walker tell the story of his family's past effort to work with the town to do exactly that. And it's really a 20-year history of frustration and millions of dollars spent on that effort. Now, I'm sure commissioners, you understand sort of as a basic fact of annexation law in Colorado, municipalities don't have to annex any particular property, and they have very broad leeway for what they can demand from a property owner as part of that process. And in that context, municipalities can, and they often do, impose whatever conditions they want to and exact concessions from property owners before the municipality will agree to annex. What might not be as widely understood or known is that the flip side is also true. Except in limited circumstances, property owners can't be forced to annex to a municipality. And this really is a fundamental property rights issue in Colorado. It's not unusual for a state constitution to have a Bill of Rights. Colorado's constitution has a Bill of Rights. What is a little more unusual is for a state Bill of Rights to protect landowners and give them a constitutional right against involuntary annexation. And that is what Colorado's constitution does. We have an enumerated constitutional right against forced annexation in Section 30 of the Bill of Rights. It provides that no unincorporated area may be annexed to a municipality unless one of three conditions have been met. That's that it must be submitted to a vote of the landowners, and they must vote to agree. The landowners themselves, more than half of them owning more than half the land, can petition to annex, or enclaves that are entirely surrounded by the town or by a town or town-owned property. None of those conditions apply here. The town can't initiate a vote, the town can't force the Walkers to petition, and this property is not a qualified enclave. So that means the Walkers have a constitutional right not to have their property annexed to the town without their agreement. Now, despite this, you've heard over and over, particularly from representatives of the town, that this property should not be allowed to develop unless it's annexed. That may actually be the most consistent overarching comment provided about the development plan side of this itself. Now, look, that's a totally understandable concern and consideration. Developing the property within the town was the Walkers' first inclination. And despite how difficult it was going through that first process, it was their second and their third inclination as well to try again with the town. But we're now 20 years later and millions of dollars spent, and they have not found the town to be a partner that they can work with to make this happen. Now, especially in that context, the continued efforts to try to force an annexation violates the Walkers' rights. The Walkers have a really deep connection to this place. They feel fortunate to be in Douglas County on many levels. One of those is this county and you commissioners have a well-earned reputation of actually respecting private property rights. We know that's not true everywhere, but here property rights do mean something, and the Constitution still means something. Because the Walkers can't be forced to annex to the town, they're entitled to have their plan fairly judged on its merits against the county's planning criteria. Others on the team have done a great job addressing specifically how the plan meets the criteria, but I do want to just leave with one additional sort of forward-looking comment on this, and a condition. There is nothing that would prevent the Walkers from annexing the property to the town after county approval. It just has to make sense and be fair for both the Walkers and the town. And the Walkers firmly believe that having this county approval would actually help bring us closer to a deal. It would mean that the Walkers would not have to start over, back at square one, as they have several times already. And this isn't unprecedented by any stretch. There are significant projects that have been zoned in the county and have ultimately become parts of municipalities. Projects like the Canyons were entitled in the county and then annexed. Lone Tree and Castle Pines were county projects that were ultimately incorporated. So how do we make progress here? Following the approval of the rezoning, the Walkers are committed to trying again to work with the town to reach an agreement on annexation. That offer has been communicated to the town. There's a letter in the packet at the beginning of Attachment F. Unfortunately, there wasn't a response or engagement from the town to that effort. Kurt Walker invited the council members to come out to the ranch to discuss, but they're still not giving up here. Beyond the prior commitments, we want to make a concrete proposal for an additional condition of approval. And that would be that within 120 days of the board's approval of the plan development rezoning, that the applicant will commence an additional attempt to negotiate in good faith with the town of Castle Rock to annex the property to the town. We believe that approach would encourage agreement and respect the Walkers' rights to have the county fairly evaluate their plan on the merits and their constitutional rights to pursue annexation on reasonable and mutually agreeable terms. I'll turn it back over to Marcus.
Terrific. Thank you, Bill. Chair and Commissioner Thomas, I will summarize and close here. I really want to focus, if there's a way, on this idea of moving forward, to be purpose-driven, to really reach a crescendo that we've reached in this process. I do want to acknowledge, with the condition that was just offered about annexation, 120 days to commence that process, to have that open dialogue that we've all heard about. There's also one last comment that we have really missed throughout this. There has generally been comments about the economic impact to Castle Rock, that Castle Rock will not receive sales tax, as many taxes, because this would be in the county. We actually want to find that same balance. We want predictability, we want to be good neighbors, and we want to share that. So we are proposing as our final condition of approval that the annexation is completely in good faith, right? We just went through that. We hope that moves forward, and obviously then we would be in the town of Castle Rock. There would be sales tax. But if not, to show our full and genuine commitment, we want to propose a shared sales tax agreement, if it remains in the county, that comes back to the town of Castle Rock. That would be, because there is not a town of Castle Rock sales tax on the site, we could create a sales tax, a new revenue stream, a PIF is what we would call it, a public improvement fee, that allows us to share that back to the county. Or to the town. So regardless, we keep the town whole. We hear that they want to understand, hey, there's an economic impact here. We want to have other commitments. Beside the $80 million in roadways, besides all the other improvements, we actually want to see an economic impact. We want to commit to that. I'm going to return in closing here back to this idea of this discussion about balance that we want to find. I have to tell you, it's been remarkably uncomfortable to talk about, kind of an involuntary annexation or a coordinated campaign against the applicant and the county process. It has led to a lot of feelings, a lot of intimidation, a lot of just difficult situations. But here's the reality. In the last 6 months, in the last 6 days, with you all as the steady hand, we have made more progress than we have made in 21 years. This is the first public hearing we have had in 21 years. But in this public hearing, you heard remarkable statements from Town of Castle Rock officials, from us. There is the ability to lean forward, to not focus, to not have only dueling experts and look at that way. And we want to meet that middle. We want to move forward. That statement that hurt a lot during that campaign, you heard it 12 times in that coordinated messaging, was send us back to the drawing board. Folks, the PD is generally completely supported from a land plan. We are making conditions of approval to bring that water appeal to be fully compliant, to be compliant with 18A. We believe we meet the approval criteria, but we need you to move us forward. Approval of the PD and approval of the water appeal does one thing. It requires that we all work together. It allows Douglas County to be the steady hand you have been, and it requires Castle Rock and the applicant, the Walker family, to work together and move this site forward. We respectfully request, in accordance with the Planning Commission, we believe with our presentation and all the foregoing material that we are compliant with both the water appeal approval criteria and the PD approval criteria. We will conclude our rebuttal with this, and we absolutely and respectfully request your support for this appeal, and we look forward to working with both the town and the county moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pochner, and thank you to the applicant. Questions for the applicant?
Thank you. I would like to thank you, everyone here, for that really great follow-up. I have got scads of notes. I've been reading about this. And so what I heard you say pulled a lot of things together. I just have a couple of questions.
Sure.
To Mr. Walker, could you explain the second condition that you are proposing that we accept? Now, the first condition was that you would have to provide reports that audit what your water use is, just like we have already done as a board to Dominion when we provided them a water appeal to lower from our 0.75 requirement. So can you explain what that second condition is, please?
The second condition is just meant to codify what we have already stated in our, both our Metro District Service Plan and in our approvals by CDPHE, that we have stated we are going to incorporate a renewable water resource into our water supply. What we have stated in those two elements is that we're going to do that. This makes that a commitment for approval moving forward. It allows you to have a say in that, making that something that is a requirement for moving forward with this approval.
Okay, so you mentioned, thank you.
Yeah.
You mentioned the CDPHE approval just now. I did not hear that referred to at all in this rebuttal section. Can you just explain the importance, having worked with CDPHE on other boards I have been on for years, to get an approval from CDPHE seems to me to be a big hurdle to have accomplished. So can you explain that approval to me and what that means?
Absolutely, and again, I am just a landowner here, so I might speak and bring up our water and wastewater expert if I get out of my depth, pardon the pun. But that was a very long and lengthy process. You'll notice that when you look at the file number for Pine Canyon, it starts with 2020, and that's because this was put on file in 2020. And the reason this has taken so long to get before you is because we took 2 years to gain those CDPHE approvals for our water and wastewater system. And the reason that took so long was twofold. One, we wanted to ensure that what we were doing with that water and wastewater system was innovative, sustainable, and it stretched and lengthened our water supply. And what we did in that process was go through multiple approval processes with them, proving out the viability of our water plan from a financial, managerial, operational, and technical perspective, that we could achieve everything we've set forward in terms of our ability to properly reclaim all of the water we will produce at Pine Canyon, and then turn it right around and reuse it 100% on site. Now, we worked with them in a very iterative process that was subject to public input. Other water entities from around the area gave their comment and were allowed to say, hey, what about this aspect of the plan? We're a little unsure about this. And CDPHE could take that into their account and then issued their approvals for our plan based upon the many different hurdles that we went through in terms of proving out those technical, managerial, and financial aspects of the plan, including our ability to show that there was enough expertise on the team, including showing that the district was financially viable, including the incorporation of that renewable water fund, and showing that the targets that we were putting, whether that was our clean water targets, whether that was our ability not to discharge to the creek, or whether that was our water usage targets, what we were talking about in terms of indoor use, were achievable. There are very strict standards in Regulation 22, which is the Colorado state regulation whereby CDPHE issues that approval, that you have to meet. And some of those criteria state that this water and wastewater plan will have no deleterious effects upon the water quality of the watershed and the project site. And CDPHE found in their approvals that that was the case. They also look very clearly at consolidation to existing water and wastewater facilities. And that was the longest piece of their approval criteria, was looking at whether or not it would be better for Pine Canyon to simply consolidate to the existing facility. And what they found was that was not the case. Consolidation to the existing facility would have required us to go to an older facility which treats water to a lesser standard, and it would have required us to discharge water that includes nutrients and pollutants to the creek. Whereas our plan now allows us to retain all of our water, reuse it on site 100%, treat it to a higher standard, and to use new, innovative, updated technology to do so. So that entire process was lengthy, but we are very happy with what they were able to achieve in terms of, as I said, these 20 years have been a bit of a whetstone honing the project. They've made it better. And the approvals we achieved from CDPHE, not just the Reg 22, but also the Land Application Management Plan. If you want to understand, hey, where do our outdoor irrigation numbers come from? Those were heavily crafted with the scientific expertise of CDPHE to understand what are the agronomic uptake rates of the type of flora that we're talking about on site. And that was approved as part of their process in November 2022.
So Commissioner Layden, thank you for indulging my questions. I do have other questions. I'd like to turn it over to you after I just asked James Eklund, who spoke about the water earlier on last week. If I could just ask him a question, and then it's yours, but I do have other questions. Is that acceptable?
Commissioner Thomas, thank you for that. I think the intent of our hearing today is for the fact finders, this board, to ensure that we have enough information to deliberate and reach a decision. So I support that. Let me just turn to council and confirm that we can have testimony from Mr. Eklund.
You may. Commissioners may ask testimony of anyone who's previously spoken, whether it's staff or applicant.
Okay, and I want to be very thoughtful about, this is the applicant's application, and always want to respect that, and certainly we are bound by the legal criteria here. But that said, I'm very open to the notion of us receiving more information so that we can appropriately deliberate.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Eklund, you spoke last week, and after you testified, gave us all the information, I asked if all the information met these first two criteria on the board, because number 3 under the water appeal does not apply to this proposal. And now we have heard 2 additional conditions that the applicant is offering. One is about auditable reports. The second one is about the reuse or the renewable fund and the renewable aspects of going forward with this plan. With the two new criteria, with the two criteria here, is there any other information that you think we need to hear in order to make this decision about if this water appeal is sustainable and is acceptable?
Thank you, Commissioner. So James Eklund, last name Eklund. I know for a fact that you have everything you need to make a determination on those first two criteria as we sit here right now, without me yapping on anymore. I will add, the reason I was late coming down here is I was up at the International Economic Development Council's conference in Denver, where 1,200 economic development officers are meeting, and I spoke to them about water. This is the type of development, this is the type of example I frankly have to have, commissioners, in order to tell the story that I need to tell, because those same people in that room, the vast, vast majority, are not from Colorado. They are off to our competitors. They're off to, they're here in the Front Range today. They will be off to Phoenix or Austin or Sacramento, Reno, San Diego. And we have a better story to tell because of the process that you all are applying right here. So the only thing I would add to what you've already heard and the information that you've digested is how important it is that this belt and suspenders approach that has been presented with these additional conditions, we really need this to move forward as a voice about resiliency and water conservation and how we apply the standards at this is as close to the ground as it gets. This is what policy wonks like I have, we get to pontificate about this stuff all the time. This is where the rubber meets the road. And I firmly believe that you have the information to support the satisfaction of the first two criteria.
Thank you. Commissioner Layden.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. I think it's important that the public gets a very clear and transparent insight into where we as board members are currently at. We've had some time to obviously think about public testimony. And, this is not meant to be condescending on any level, but I have 3 kids and I spend a lot of time parenting. And I know you do too, many of the folks in this room. And I often tell my kids when they're not agreeing with one another, you can figure it out, or I can, but you're not going to like my decision. So why don't you take the time to work through that with one another before getting Dad involved? I think a couple of comments were very salient to me. The first was from Mr. Pochner, who we've come to know and respect for many years. Wonderful presentation. But what you said was really significant. We're talking about a 20-year dialogue with Town of Castle Rock, and you made more progress in this last week than you have in 20 years. So part of me has the sense, and again, this is your application, I can weigh in on whether or not I think you've met the water demand standard and the PD and many other of the legal criteria we're looking at, or you can engage with Town of Castle Rock and all of these phenomenal people here that have continued to show up and continue those productive discussions. That is not my decision, that is your decision, but it was significant to me that you said you made a lot of progress this last week. The other thing that is challenging to me is we do not normally see testimony from other municipalities in this room, and we try to respect the autonomy of other jurisdictions, so I don't usually go and testify at Town of Castle Rock, although I have when it's important. And we saw a lot of citizens from Castle Rock, and we saw the town itself, including the Castle Rock Water and Sand members and members of the business community and the town manager. It makes me think that this really is more of a conversation between you and the Town of Castle Rock that has not occurred. And I share Mr. Walker's frustration I could not imagine spending 20 years with a multi-generational Colorado family trying to work through these dynamics and not receive the opportunity to do this. This should be occurring down the street at town of Castle Rock. And so I continue to be just befuddled as to why we are in this position. And I think part of what I heard from the testimony is that you're frustrated and at sort of your wit's end. You haven't had an opportunity to be heard. We've reviewed the packet as ad nauseum. I think, the letter from Mark Marlowe from the Water and Sanitation District is very salient to me. I'm pleased to weigh in on that right now, but maybe, Mr. Pochner, if you have any response.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Chair Layden. I think it's a really thoughtful question about the struggle, right? And we really did talk about in that third rebuttal topic, this balance, finding that balance. I think what you sense from us, and the reason we brought it up in the last 6 days, the last 2 weeks from Planning Commission to here, we have had the public exchange of ideas about how to move forward. The challenge has always been that none of this has happened in public before. And as you heard, and the biggest caution that we have, and Commissioner, I completely respect, don't make us weigh in, right? Go through that process, is one, we believe we're in the right jurisdiction. But secondly, we completely understand the sentiment that we should be working together, right? It is an amazing thing. I do a lot of land use hearings. I've never seen a town come forward with this. But it is also the public acknowledgement that when nobody else was there between the town and the Walker family, it didn't work. So why we are asking for this, why we have literally stood in front of a coordinated campaign of opposition is to say we need the third party, we need the county who in your comprehensive plan says we will support annexation of existing PDs. We're not an existing PD. We are creating a PD. And then that force, that strength, that steady hand of the county moves us forward to go have those conversations with the town. So, sir, we are not saying that we don't end up in Castle Rock. I think we've actually put conditions there, right? We have put rhetoric there. We want to have that discussion. But what we need is a PD plan so we don't start over outside of this public domain. We don't know what that yields, but we only have 2 decades of experience of what that yields. Now, why it is so remarkable is we heard commissioners, we heard the town manager, we heard the mayor, very respected, very good friends we've all worked with and respect, say there's a way forward. But that way forward, we believe, is with the county watching the process move forward. That is that idea of an approved PD. So we have a document that we are discussing. We have a water plan that we are discussing. Then we work together. If we're simply starting over again, we are taking the 22-year property rights of this and saying, go start over. We don't think we've earned that. We think we've earned a plan that moves forward. So, sir, that's my response to that, is it's not at all. We know we're not right about everything. I want to be really clear about that. I know Castle Rock is also not right about everything. But with this 3-party system here, we've all been pretty good at this. We're all moving to the middle and finding a way forward. That's what we're asking and why we're effectively looking for that parental supervision to move us down the path here to get this deal done.
I appreciate that, Mr. Pochner. So I think consistent with my colleague's approach, I would like to hear again from experts that have taken the time to be here with us. And I don't intend to put anybody on the spot, but in many ways I will. And I think I'm looking to Mark Marlowe. If you have any response to what we heard today, I certainly would appreciate your comments.
Could I just ask the county attorney if we are in a process that citizen comment has been closed, if it's appropriate to bring other people up other than the applicant and the
Commissioner, that is exactly what I just asked, and I think the attorney said that we could invite anybody from the public back. Do you want to clarify that, counsel?
The individual who was here and has previously spoke. I would say that we want to be very clear that we're not inviting additional public testimony, but instead asking for comments related to what was said today. So it's in response to a reply.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Marlowe?
Well, Well, thank you for inviting me back up to respond. Just a couple of things, I guess. First of all, I would echo the sentiment that we heard from the applicant about working together on annexation. So I think the town, from my understanding, is committed to working together to try to get that done. With respect to the water appeal, which is really my area of interest, I think it's important to understand the approval that, I think I just want to respond to one thing. First, the approval from CDPHE. It's very important to understand that approval is for a site location application for a wastewater treatment plant. That is not an approval for a water system or a water supply. CDPHE, the Water Quality Control Division is not in a place to approve water supply. They do not do that. They also don't approve potable water systems. So it's important to understand that. It's also important to understand there are additional things that still need to happen even on the wastewater. One is approval of the design of the wastewater plant, and then also approval of a notice of authorization or the permit. So that's just a little background on that. With respect to the renewable water supply, this is my main area of concern, and I think the applicant spoke to that a little bit. They do have in their plan the potential offer to collect revenues for a future renewable water supply. This is an area I have a lot of experience in. This is a very difficult thing for a development this size to do without significant additional regional help and working together with someone else. The bottom line is this is the piece that's most important from my perspective, is this renewable water supply. We spent, as I testified before, multiple decades working towards transitioning off of the deep Denver Basin groundwater aquifers. And I would be very concerned if we decide we're just going to change that after these 2 decades and go back to relying solely on Denver Basin groundwater. And the applicant also indicated that, you know, it's in the Central Basin, so it's very reliable, but it's still a non-renewable resource. It's still declining, and it's still a concern. And they also indicated that one of the entities we talked about, or all of the entities we talked about as getting help from Castle Rock and the county, were outside of the Central Basin. That's actually not quite accurate. Bell Mountain Ranch is in the Central Basin. So, and interestingly enough, so is, I referenced a church in my previous testimony. It's working with us to try to get service at this point. But the bigger concern here is, are we going to just change direction and go from renewable water supplies back to solely off of non-renewable groundwater? Now, the applicant has offered to work towards renewable water. I guess what I would say is if that is the case, if that's what they're offering, then the commission should certainly put some kind of hard requirement in terms of that renewable water supply. It's one thing to say we're going to collect some revenues from our customers and we'll get a renewable water supply someday in the future. It's another thing to say, hey, we will get a renewable water supply before we develop, or before we start to develop. And unless there's anything else, I think I'll end it there, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Marlowe. I appreciate that. Mr. Walker, Marcus, any response to that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that I think are definitely noteworthy in what I'd like to say. First of all, I do think there's points of note, and we seem to be going back and forth between the idea of solely on groundwater, right? That was just posited maybe 3 or 4 times, while in conjunction with the idea of that we would be getting renewable water or not, right? There's only one entity that said this is going to develop solely on non-renewable groundwater, and it isn't us that has said that, right? We've said multiple times we will be integrating renewable water into this water supply plan, and we've even offered a condition stating that we'll codify that statement. We're more than happy to even go further than that and amend that codification to a percentage number, if that would so please the board. Secondarily, one of the things that's worth noting is the idea of, hey, let's not go backwards, right? Let's transition off of groundwater use. And as we showed on our slide there, the majority of what we're talking about in terms of water use at Pine Canyon is going to be reuse water. That is the most effective tool of transitioning off of groundwater use, as quoted by the very entity we just heard from. They described it as the most effective, most cost-effective, most environmentally sound, and most sustainable tool. That is the hallmark of our plan. And in fact, we'll be able to do it in the best way possible because of our ability as a small district. By integrating the purple pipe, dual pipe system from the very beginning, we're able to integrate it 100% through the entire system instead of trying to retrofit or tack it on as we see in existing districts. Secondarily, just to note, when we talk about things like Bell Mountain Ranch or a church needing help, an HOA that doesn't have its own water and wastewater system and a church are not the equivalent to a master plan community with a fully designed water and wastewater district, right? Comparing them, that is definitionally comparing apples to oranges, maybe apples to onions. Again, when we talk about the CDPHE approvals, Mr. Marlowe is right, that is a site location approval. But we've also gained a land application management plan approval from CDPHE, dictating all of our outdoor irrigation. We've also gained preliminary effluent limits for that wastewater system. But it's also worth noting that this is not the typical wastewater system, right? What's part of it is its complete production of and reuse of 100% of what's created. This is in effect creating an additional water supply for Pine Canyon. It's why we're able to leave so much of our groundwater in the ground. It's what allows us to use more water that isn't groundwater. This is not a going back. This is not a let's pump all of the water we own and use it. That's not what we're asking for. In fact, annexing would force us to dedicate all of our groundwater to the town. But doing this plan here allows us to keep 35% of our groundwater at a minimum in the aquifer, keeping it more sustainable and more stable.
The only thing I'd add to that simple point is that certainly agree with Mr. Marlowe, the point at the end that if there are going to be, is there going to be a condition like this to add some type of requirements to that? We had drafted our condition both as that commitment, reaffirming that that's already in the documents, but secondly, making that a percentage commitment, right? We heard a lot of different water entities and districts talk about as a percentage. So we have drafted that, I think really understanding that there needs to be those commitments, right? Understanding that. I think one thing I just want to say, you know I am not a water expert, but hearing what Kurt is really focused on is 50% of our water is renewable water. In Castle Rock, that is treated as reuse. That is a it's reuse water. That is a renewable water. Then adding on top of that, so we're at a 50 already from that reuse water. We want to go further to get to some of those percentages that you've heard other districts talk about, those standards that are out there. So we completely concur. We agree that those are the right type of step forwards to make all of this happen.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pauker. Any other questions for the applicant?
So, Mr. Eklund, I heard you say that you were at a convention of some kind this morning about economic development, and that you tied this kind of new, or this two-pipe system, the purple pipe system, it sounds like this is a closed system, that water will stay within the system, is something that other cities might look at, but it is an advantage right now that we would have here for economic development. Is that where you were going with that comment?
That is, and thank you for clarifying that, Commissioner. The other cities that are in the arid west are sometimes getting to this same result with a lot more pain involved. And this is a voluntary action that the applicant here is willing to take. And that's why I think this is an opportunity to lead in the space.
Okay. Commissioner Lane, did you want to ask any questions about the development itself, or are you just focusing on the water appeal, and then we'll move on to the next one?
I'm pretty focused on the water right now, and I think it'd be good for us to get through that line of inquiry before we go to the PD.
Okay. I do see that there has been a chart put up on the screen, and this morning when I came in, I did ask staff about this as well, because last week when we were hearing testimony, I thought this column that showed demand use was significant, because if I recall, the request on this water appeal is for 0.20. And this chart shows how many water districts in Douglas and Elbert County already show that they are using less than the 0.20. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. So, the other issue that I'm looking at is this notion that in your water efficiency plan, that your reuse system needs to be that Category 3 plus. Do you disagree, or do you think it's just Category 3?
By making it Category 3 plus, we can actually reuse the water for more things, including indoor commercial flushing of toilets and other uses like that, which allows us to reuse it more and make it stretch longer.
Yeah.
That's what we've been approved for. It allows us to continue to use the water and lengthen our supply.
So you're not intending to just use it for irrigation, which can only be used once. So
Correct.
Reusing to extinction.
Correct.
So I think part of the consternation is that, we don't really know of any Category 3 plus systems in the state, and that there's some concern about your experience operating this sort of system, having never done that. So maybe speak to that expertise that you're going to try to bring to this project.
Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Robert Fraschetti, Fracagtti. As I mentioned last Tuesday, I'm a professional engineer in Colorado with 34 years of experience in water and wastewater facility design. Specifically regarding reclaimed water and water reclamation facilities that can treat to a Category 3 plus, my firm personally has designed over 20 of these specific facilities using a membrane bioreactor. There's a facility in Oakley, Utah that meets this standard, and the reason it can meet this standard is technology. The technology used, as I mentioned, is a membrane. It's a 0.04 micron filtration device, and there are numerous examples of those facilities here in Colorado that meet this standard. Just happen to have a water sample here from the Johnstown Low Point wastewater treatment facility that we just commissioned. Uses the identical technology. Interestingly enough, we're looking at direct potable reuse and indirect potable reuse of water generated by membrane bioreactors. And we just had this water tested for potable drinking water standards, which is the Regulation 11 in Colorado. And it only had 3 issues that required further treatment. So it's drinkable at this point, except for salt, sodium, and in this case had a bit of selenium in it. So this is real water from a real facility that we designed here in Colorado. Spring Valley Ranch, which you saw up on the board, they also have a membrane bioreactor facility that was installed 16 years ago. So as far as the ability of a district to operate and maintain these facilities, the proof is here in Colorado. Furthermore, I would say that the facility would be operated by a licensed wastewater operator. In this case, we've already consulted with Ramey Environmental Compliance. Mr. Ramey spoke at the Planning Commission hearing about his comfort level with this technology and meeting a Category 3+. I'll further state that the State Health Department has the standard in place, and it requires continuous monitoring for pathogens, viruses, turbidity, water quality. So it's not a complicated system to run. It's been in the public domain for 30 years. All over California. You can Google water reuse membrane bioreactors and you'll see this everywhere. So very, very, very doable, very comfortable for a certified wastewater operator to do that. And likewise, as far as the administration of the water, the distribution of the water through the purple pipe system, that's basic engineering. You have a storage pond, you have a pump, you have a purple pipe, you have a pressure sensing device. When the sprinklers come on, the pumps ramp up their speed and create more pressure. And I'll furthermore say that the beauty of reclaimed water in its Category 3+ use is that you can use it for just about anything in Colorado, including fire protection, including car washing. So we really have a dual fire protection system as well. Town of Castle Rock mentioned that the fire protection system wouldn't be equivalent. I would argue that we have millions of gallons of water on site on demand through two separate systems, the groundwater system plus the recycled water system. So Category 3+ is safe, reliable, and there's plenty of examples, and Stonegate's another one that just came to my mind. So if you would like, I can take anyone from this room on a tour of a wastewater treatment plant that makes 3+ water and reports that every day.
Thank you for that. So let me ask our engineering experts on staff to respond to that. And I don't know if we have our consultant online.
This is Ken Murphy for staff.
Thanks. And before you get started, so the lens through which I am looking at this is 1808A.07.1, health, safety, and welfare of the present or future inhabitants of the county. And my concern specifically is an inexperienced developer implementing a system that is fairly new.
This is Ken Murphy for staff again. While we provide engineering services at the county, water supply and water treatment is not one of those services.
Do we have our water expert available?
We do not.
How long would it take to get our water expert available for this critical hearing about water?
We would have to call Bruce Lytle and see whether he's available to speak or come on to the hearing.
Okay, I'll pause that line of inquiry for now, but I think it might be wise to give him a buzz immediately. Commissioner Thomas.
The only other thing that I have noted here when I was reading through the packet is that the Douglas County Health Department did approve the water plan. My notes here say on page 1446 that the Douglas County Health Department favorably recommended both the water and the sanitation system in this project.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. So I think let's pause on the line of inquiry associated with the water appeal. I know you had some questions about the PD.
In light of the PD, I was interested to question the two additional conditions that you have offered. So the first one was about there would be a conversation, and this might go to one of your questions, Commissioner Layden, within 120 days, if the county approves the application, that you, the applicant, would be required to have a conversation with the town within 120 days. So can you explain what that looks like?
Sure, I'm happy to, and Kirk can add in. I think the process that we went through was really that continued. That was the most common comment, right? It was the idea of annexation. What this allows us to do is to have that underlying PD, that land plan be the basis of then how to move forward those discussions for annexation. So it really makes us both balance that idea. We're not starting over. We're not saying, hey, go throw out 21 years of planning and reflecting every neighborhood around you, but let's sit down and actually figure out if there's a path forward. So Commissioner Thomas, it is an affirmative duty now as a condition of approval that requires us to go have that discussion. I think we all heard it, right? We all have heard different parts of our team say, I think there may be a way forward if that were to happen, but we believe we need that as part of a condition of approval, because then there's an underlying plan that allows us to move forward.
Thank you. And the second one, if I understand this, is that you would put a PIF over this, overlay it over your development, and so there would be an additional tax raised that would then go to the town. Can you explain that if I understand that correctly?
Absolutely. So I just want to answer your question, which is a very good one, with finishing where I started. If you ask Castle Rock to reply to our condition that within 120 days we need to commence that conversation about annexation, they would say, we don't know what good faith is, we don't know if we have to move forward with that. So what we did is we said, we're going to put belts and suspenders on that very thought, and we're going to say to you, our town partners, we understand that you are very concerned about, is there any financial benefit, tax benefit to the town for those impacts? So we want to offer this condition to go annex, to have discussions about annexation, right, to move forward. But if that doesn't work, you still get to be made whole. We still get to mitigate that impact. So we are honoring our commitment. We're not just saying, hey, we'll talk in 120 days. Let's see how it turns out. We're saying we're going to make that. Commissioner, to the mechanics of that, as you know much better than I, this would be, if approved as a PD, it would theoretically develop in the county without annexation. It has the county sales tax, but not the overlay of the town sales tax. So what we would do is, through our metro district, create the imposition of a sales tax or a PIF, public improvement fee, that basically matches what would happen if you were in the town. That new revenue stream, not taking from the county, that new isolated revenue stream allows us to share that back to the town. We agree, town, you should have an economic impact. We want to match that. That's why we're offering those two conditions together.
And you also talked about the traffic study.
Yes.
And when I read the traffic study, it looked like to me that our county engineers had accepted the plan, that it was acceptable. And you talked about, there was a map you showed that had different dots on it, and there were 12 intersections. Can you talk about what that is about?
Absolutely. Comprehensive traffic study that looked at, there were about 23 dots, Commissioner, that showed the intersections we studied, right, for that analysis. And then it led to improvements on 11 or 12 of those intersections. And what it does, I'm seeing Curtis. Let me get out of the way. There's the finest traffic engineer in Colorado right here to answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Good morning, Commissioners. Again, Curtis Rowe with Kimley Horn, last name spelled R-O-W-E. And we prepared the traffic impact study for this. As he was alluding to, we did a comprehensive study of the surrounding intersections. We scoped those intersections with Douglas County staff, CDOT, and Town of Castle Rock staff. So all three entities came together and said, these are the intersections that you need to study. We studied those 23 intersections. We found that there are improvements that are needed at 12 of them. Not all of them because of this project. Some of them are just needed today or based upon future traffic growth. But the applicant has provided a commitment to improving those. And so this is the exhibit that you were asking about. The dark green dot intersections, those are the intersections that show those improvements, where those would be located. And some of those are signalized intersections, roundabout, additional turn lanes, extension of turn lanes, all of those elements.
So the traffic, there were a few people that talked about traffic on Tuesday, and I think this answers those questions.
I agree. Obviously, with with the way that we prepare all of our traffic studies, it meets the national and local standards. We prepared the traffic study the same for Douglas County and CDOT as we would have if this were a project in the town of Castle Rock. And with that, we evaluate all of the surrounding intersections, come up with the intersections that need those improvements, and then mitigate those.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions about traffic. Do you, Commissioner Layden?
I do, Commissioner Thomas, and thank you for raising this. So let me turn to our engineering staff to respond. Obviously, we're getting a bit of a he said, she said on the traffic and engineering and the level of service. Will these improvements improve traffic or, based upon the number of new potential residents, impair it?
Chris Martin for engineering. The improvements that are identified would bring the intersections to acceptable levels of service.
Acceptable levels of service, will it increase traffic or reduce traffic?
Can you rephrase that, please?
I'm going to ask the common sense question that all of our citizens are asking. There's an acceptable level of service, but a lot of times that level of service is like a D or an F. So I'm asking, with the additional development here and the improvements that are being mentioned by the engineer and the applicant, will traffic increase or be decreased by these improvements?
The improvements don't increase or decrease the traffic. They mitigate the impacts of the traffic that's generated by the development.
Right. So including in your analysis the improvements that are being made, and then that net traffic study would reveal what to us about the level of traffic?
The net would be that the intersections would operate at acceptable levels of service, D or better.
And what are they currently operating at?
They all have different existing levels of service, but they're all in acceptable levels. I don't have that chart in front of me that shows the specific ones and what their existing levels of service are.
Okay, that's what I need to know. Will there be more congestion or less, all things considered?
I can tell you that over time, the congestion is going to increase. It's not based solely on the traffic from this development, but the congestion will occur with or without the development of this project.
I understand that with increased population in our community, congestion may increase if we don't address it. But specifically, I mean, ceteris paribus, all things remaining equal, with this development and the improvements that they're including, will congestion increase or decrease? Versus doing nothing.
Excuse me?
So if we don't approve the application in the land use plan today, the PD, and it remains exactly how it's always been, and understanding that level of congestion may or may not increase, I'm asking you to compare an approval versus a non-approval today. Will there be more congestion if we approve this?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Additional questions, Commissioner?
Not about traffic.
Okay. So I do have some questions of the town of Castle Rock, and I do see Town Manager Corliss here, as well as I think Desiree LaFleur was here for a little bit. If there are members of, there you are, floating around, there's Castle Rock. If Town of Castle Rock members and maybe the manager are interested in responding to some of the conversation here, I think it would be helpful for us to get some information from you.
Good morning, Dave Corliss, Castle Rock Town Manager. Commissioners, I'm happy to respond to any questions. Here comes Mayor Gray. I want to make it very clear that the town of Castle Rock welcomes the Walker family and the Pine Canyon development within the town. That has been our position. It's been the position for the 9 years that I've been privileged to be the manager in Castle Rock. That's the position of all of my bosses, the mayor and council members during that entire period of time. The idea that the town is somehow hostile to development will create some giggles in the room, because On an average day, we're issuing 1 or 2 single-family detached building permits every day in town. Before interest rates moved up, we were issuing 3 single-family detached building permits every day. We're not opposed to development. We're not opposed to good quality development. Mr. Chairman, this is forum shopping. Happens in a legal stance. They're shopping for a different forum. They're looking to see where they think they can probably get a good deal. They're fully entitled to do that under the law, to seek zoning and development in the unincorporated county. They may also want to do it in the town. They're looking for what they think is going to be the best deal, not only for themselves, but also for the development going forward. As I recall, back in 2020, I thought we were very close. I think we had it down to 2 or 3 issues. We needed to confirm the water and exactly how we were going to achieve our water code. We made sure that this property was grandfathered in regards to our new requirement for renewable water sources, and Mark has previously talked about that. We talked about traffic. Previously, the town had staff, and this has only been at a staff level. They've never requested to go before a planning commission, never requested to go before town council. One of the other remaining issues that I recall was that we were concerned about traffic. We shake our head in regards to the traffic standards because while it might meet the county standards, it's not meeting the town standards. That's why. It's within the town. It needs to meet the town's traffic standards. We did take, I just want to, if I could just complete 2 other thoughts in regards to this. We had in earlier conversations talked about perhaps a need for a new interchange at I-25 and Blackfeather. We have since removed that from our discussions, removed that from any development requirements. We made that clear to the applicant. As you know, we're very busy building another interchange to the south part of town. We don't anticipate another interchange. We had also talked about acquisition of additional open space. That really has changed significantly now with the with the town and with the county's participation, the acquisition of Lost Canyon Ranch. Got 681 acres of open space contiguous. It's a lot of acreage. That's larger than this entire development. So our interest in trying to spend money with other partners to acquire open space in this area, it is spectacular. It's beautiful property. Has been greatly diminished really within the recent years. I think we're very close toward having an acceptable development within the town. I don't think they need to build a wastewater plant if they connect to the town. I don't think they need to build a water treatment plant if they connect to the town. We've got a lot of concerns in regards to a mobility hub, whether or not that's actually going to work within our community, whether or not it makes sense for Castle Rock. Not all that excited about maintaining a tunnel underneath 10 lanes of traffic. So we've got some questions about that. Some of the rest of the project, I think, just needs to go through our process. We have a very robust process in regards to encouraging citizens to participate and make a project better. We require a minimum of 3 neighborhood meetings where the neighbors get to ask questions, and we stick around until those questions are answered. It's a different, not saying your process is inferior or superior, we just have a different process. We'd want to have that project go through our process. It's unfortunate that we're here in this situation. Unfortunate to put you all in this situation. We still contend that it's not in the public welfare to not make sure that you're going to be on renewable water. I'm not sure what their renewable water commitment really means. What does it mean? Does it mean that from the very first building permit, they're going to be able to point to renewable water? I don't think so. We've got other concerns that just really need to be worked through our process. That's why we have respectfully, hopefully, urge you to deny the water appeal, deny the PD, send them back to the town. We're ready and welcome to process that. I would consider it one of the highlights of my career if we can effectively process the Pine Canyon development within the town of Castle Rock. I want to show them that we are professional, that we know how to make it happen. We know how to build a quality neighborhood that we can all be proud of. So thank you for listening to me. That was going to be the additional minute that I was going to speak last week, Commissioner. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Curlis, I appreciate this is unusual to have another municipality here. I thank you and all of your council for joining us and Mayor for joining us. I think we are all very cognizant of the deep level of public service you demonstrate and the willingness to create truly fantastic developments throughout the community that respect the needs of your citizens. And I don't like getting in your lane. What my question is for you is to just cut through the smoke a little bit. And I'm wondering, what I keep hearing is, there's a willingness of the town of Castle Rock to have the conversation, and I'm hearing from the applicant it's taken 20 years. So why am I here?
Commissioners, I don't really know. We made it very clear in a letter that we sent, it's in your packet, almost a year ago, that town staff could support recommending. Town staff doesn't decide stuff. We all love staff. Staff doesn't decide stuff. Elected officials do. We made it very clear to them that town staff would support the general plan development that was set out. I even argue, I'm not sure why they're dedicating property for school purposes. I'm not sure the school is going to be able to build anything there, given some of the long-term demographics. Maybe we get into that. That's all to the benefit of them. Other than that, I don't necessarily disagree with anything from a staff standpoint on the east side of I-25. Mobility hub, not so sure. Ball fields, as you all know, we're working aggressively on ball fields and Dawson Trails. If they want to do ball fields, that's fine, but we may have our Parks and Recreation Department operating ball fields. And then obviously the water and the sewer plant down, which is relatively close to neighbors. We obviously wouldn't be needed because we've already got those utilities in place in regards to the town. So I'm not sure why. I don't know that maybe they could point to a particular issue that we've actually denied recently. Earlier discussions, absolutely. Did earlier town councils talk about buying all of it for open space and some of those things? Yes, that preceded me. That preceded when Mayor Gray was on. Things have changed. Okay. So I want to be responsive to your question without filibustering. Am I?
I think that's really helpful to have some context, and what I'm hearing is there's a really strong group of professionals that are ready and willing to have the conversation with the property owner, and many times I've heard that is perhaps the desire of the applicant to have some level of cooperation with the town. That's not to say there aren't a lot of issues for you all to work out. There always are. But as you stated, the elected officials, that's where the buck stops, not with staff. So Mayor, any additional thoughts?
Well, a few things. One is I've been in Castle Rock for 27 years. So I'm familiar with the walkers and the property, and the Scots next to it and that kind of stuff. So I've always, contended that it needs to come into town. Before I was mayor, I was like, this is a great property. It eventually has to be, developed, when they want to. And I still think that it needs to come into town. I think that one of the things that we talk about is, and I think this plan, unfortunately, I think is detrimental to Castle Rock. And I think that to bring it back into Castle Rock with our water, with our traffic engineers, and with our plan will be a benefit to Castle Rock. And I think this is a detriment. I think bring it back to us. I promise that I will work very hard. I talked to the walkers already. I have 2 years, so within 2 years, I want to make sure that they're extremely happy with it, I mean, whether it's 120 days or whatever it is, but it's something I'm very, very, very keen on. And Dave has already mentioned that it was something he wants to do very, very, very well as well. And he thinks it's going to be his feather in his cap for the next few years. I think it's one of many for our town, whether it's Dawson Trails or Lost Canyon Ranch, or hopefully Pine Canyon in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And I really appreciate both you and the town manager spending some time with us today. And, nothing makes me happier than seeing people I care about get along. And, I care a lot about the town of Castle Rock. I care a lot about, fifth generation Coloradans and families with important property rights. I'm also hearing a lot of willingness on both sides to have that conversation. I have to say I'm very impressed with the applicant's willingness to really think about what was heard in the testimony, provide some really significant concessions and additional commitments. I think where I'm at today is I would like to see some further study on those commitments. It's unfortunate we don't have our water consultant here with us today. I would have, if I could, what's that?
He is online.
Is Bruce online?
Do you want us to sit down?
If you would, thank you so much. Thanks, you guys.
Matt Jacobowski for staff, correct. Bruce Lytle is available online if he's needed.
Okay. Well, I think we've kind of moved from the water conversation to the larger conceptual issues around the PD. And again, I think I would appreciate an opportunity to spend a little bit more in-depth time with Bruce, with our engineering department and our staff to get a better handle on these commitments in addition to the conversation around water. I think that candidly also provides you an opportunity to have some additional discussion. I'll be very candid that we've already closed public comment, so I'll tell you the concerns that I still have are around that 1808A07.1 about health, safety, and welfare. I am concerned about the water demand standards, and I'm not sure that has been fully satisfied in my mind, although I think you made some very salient arguments. So certainly 1808A.07.2. I also have some concern about where are we at here? It is the 150304, whether the application demonstrates public facilities and services necessary to accommodate the proposed development, and I continue to believe that there is a lot being asked of Castle Rock, whether it's fire and supportive infrastructure and services and public safety. A lot will be relied upon in Castle Rock. So I'm not sure for today I'm fully satisfied with those, but I, as one commissioner, would certainly appreciate some further study. Commissioner?
I have read all of this. I've got notes about what everyone said. And I come back to private property rights, that this county has always put the importance of private property rights as fundamental. And I came to Castle Rock in 1984. I've been here for many years. And I've always wondered why this piece of property wasn't developed. And the applicant has come here with a plan. I think the water plan we heard is newer and better technology than what is in place currently in Castle Rock. Another word I heard earlier today is uncomfortable. This is very uncomfortable for all of us because I have developed excellent working relationships with Castle Rock and the people here. And yet, I feel, as someone whose family has been in Colorado since 1892, that this land has been part of their family and their legacy, and they have the right to develop it. And so I've been looking for this balance of where we go from here.
I appreciate that, Commissioner Thomas. I don't disagree with that perspective at all. I think it was well stated that this board has long time had a history of supporting private property rights and respecting the ability of people to do with their property as they see fit. That said, I think as a colleague, I would appreciate additional time for study. I'm not prepared to deny today, but I'm also not prepared to approve. I do think we would all benefit from the opportunity to hear a little bit more about these commitments, hear back from our water consultant, and give the parties an opportunity to have some additional conversation.
So if you were asking me to consider a continuance, I would like to have a very clear list of what we want the parties involved here to work on. So what I am hearing you say is you want them to explain their conditions that they are adding to the water appeal, which includes, are you okay with the information on the audit, like Sterling Ranch needs to provide for us, or do you want more information on that?
I understand conceptually what's being offered. I think we need significant detail about those commitments. I think there was some conversation around percentages. I see the applicant shaking his head.
Okay, so the percentages, I believe, involved also the second commitment, which involved the renewable water piece. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, that is absolutely correct, that we'd go through that and try to finalize that language. We provided it to staff, but we know we need to put some more definitions here in this conversation behind that.
Okay, because if staff sent it to us, I have not seen those yet.
I understand.
So, Commissioner Layton, you were asking them to come back with more information about the 2 additional conditions they are adding for the water appeal.
Correct.
And are you suggesting that they schedule a meeting with the town and see if they can get this resolved now or not? Is that part of your request?
It is a respectful request. This is your application, but I think what I heard from you is that might be productive.
We think it's very productive. We just had a note here about, if there's obviously deferring to you two about a time-specific postponement or continuation to finalize that approval language. I'll offer on behalf of the applicant, our apologies the way that moves forward, but we really heard some things that we wanted to respond to. So we would look forward to working with staff, right, and town staff and frankly the town as well to know about that language, and then also to have those meetings with them. That idea of having required meetings where this is still ongoing, we think is really, really good. So we would absolutely be willing to sit down with the town.
Well, if the applicant is okay with that, I would ask that be a requirement, and I think we also heard on the record a firm commitment from the town of Castle Rock to engage in those productive discussions, which we greatly appreciate. Anything else, Commissioner Thomas?
Let me just ask, how long do you think you would like? Our next business meetings and land use meetings in October would be October 22nd and October 8th.
I think just conferring here, I think we're looking at that, if possible, that October 22nd. I think we just all looked at each other just to allow that time. And and I'm so sorry to come back on it, the one thing we may ask about that meeting with the town, as we're still in a county process, is that maybe the county is present in that as well, whether that's a staff-led, but to have that discussion, we would maybe just request that if we can respectfully, but then a continuation, Commissioner Thomas, to the 22nd makes perfect sense to us.
Okay, I see that Terrence Quinn, our head of planning, is not here. Maybe I'll ask the attorney, who from our staff should be in those meetings, do you think, or can you even guess?
I wouldn't be able to say who we want. I think it'd be important for us to have clear goals for the county side to make sure that they're being met. But if you wanted legal staff or planning staff involved, we could probably provide both.
Okay, I'm looking over at staff at Kurt and Matt. Do you have any input on this discussion?
Kurt White, for staff. Yes, if you want us to be in attendance, we just need clear goals as to what the county staff purpose is with these discussions between the town and the applicant.
Okay, I think it's important to keep in mind that we have a current application before us, and we have the criteria for approval on the screen. So we are not abandoning this process. I'm not saying that I'm abandoning this process, that you have to start all over. If there are things here that we can talk about and you end up with some discussion with the town, that we can work through this, that perhaps we could approve this here, then you move on with the town with more discussions if you can't get it done by October 22nd. But I just want you to hear from me that I still understand that this approval is before us and we are not abandoning this process.
That's correct, and I would just reiterate, it is clearly and properly before us. I think we're just asking for some additional time as a county to study and facilitate the opportunity for the parties to discuss.
Let me just ask the applicants, do you have any questions about what our expectation is going forward? Is there anything you would like to add or suggest?
No, we appreciate it. We appreciate the discussion and the idea of moving that forward. So we respect that. We will keep in mind the current process, right, and the approval criteria, some of the things that Chair Layden mentioned as well, and then have that discussion with that as the foreground, right? So do that. So we appreciate it. We look forward to those discussions.
Let me just thank you for that, and let me just ask of our staff if we have a specific time that we can provide. Is the 22nd of October appropriate? Okay. And just confirming from the applicant that that's okay?
That works. Yes,
okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Thomas, any other questions about that date?
I don't.
Okay, I will accept a motion.
I have a motion to continue the Pine Canyon Planned Development Water Appeal until October 22nd, 2024 at 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon. This is project file MI 2020-009.
And I will second that motion. All those in, any further discussion? All those in favor signal by saying aye.
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 I also have a motion to continue the Pine Canyon Plan Development rezoning until October 22nd, 2024 at 2:30 in the afternoon.
And I will second that motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that motion also carries 2-0. We'll see you on the 22nd. We're adjourned.
If I could just add one thing now that we have the vote out of the way. I appreciate the applicant and the work you have put into this. I appreciate the town and what you have done. And it would be wonderful if you are able to come to something by October 22nd. If not, these are still before us and we recognize that. And we don't like the uncomfortableness, and we're going to continue looking for the balance and understanding the importance of private property rights.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. We are adjourned.